What's up, y'all? In today's episode, I almost get eaten by sharks, but I also managed to get my biggest dogtooth tuna. It was an epic day, but to set the scene, it was pretty rough, but we decided to still head offshore to one of the fads in the hopes to swim with the notorious oceanic white-tip shark, which we'd seen before, and Ed at the time had never seen one. Anyway, once we arrived at the fad, we jumped in with high expectations and were greeted by a few friendly locals. The whaler sharks in this area are just so trained to the sound of the outboard. It's like a dinner bell to them. We drifted in the blue for a couple hours without really seeing anything special or worth shooting. It was pretty quiet, so I decided to shoot a rainbow runner to try and create some sort of commotion, hopefully attracting a nearby oceanic white-tip. I must say, it is pretty daunting diving down knowing there's sharks around you, and you really got to keep your head on a swivel. I certainly felt vulnerable, but I also felt safe, knowing that I had Mark and Ed watching me as we had a system set up. It definitely pays to have good dive buddies in situations like this. I stoned the fish, which meant that the sharks didn't react, but as I hit the surface, the fish started to vibrate, which got the sharks going. Shooting the fish in a situation like this is something I would only do with the right dive buddies, and at this point I'd spent a fair bit of time in the water with Mark and Ed, and they'd both been proven to be trustworthy, and I knew they had my back if things got hairy. However, looking back, I don't know if it was the wisest thing shooting the fish like this, but to give a bit more context, we'd spent a significant amount of time in the water with these sharks and had gotten a reasonable feel for their behaviour. And call me crazy, but I was actually enjoying the action, because like I mentioned, prior to this, we'd spent 2 hours of just floating around doing nothing, to now having all this action fending off these sharks. Ed was doing a great job keeping them at bay. Meanwhile, Mark was just taking photos of everything. Even though things were getting a bit hairy, I still felt quite comfortable. And this went on for a few minutes, and the sharks started becoming bolder and moving up the water column, which makes it much harder to keep your eyes on them compared to when they're below you. So it was at this point I realised that it was time to start taking things a bit more seriously, as at the end of the day, they're wild animals and can be unpredictable. And all it takes is for one shark to get a bit too friendly and things can escalate very quickly. And we were a long way from shore and help if something were to happen.
Some action.
We hung around a bit more with the sharks and tried chumming up a bit to see if anything else would come in, but it was still pretty quiet. We would have spent around 3 hours just drifting in the open waters. I absolutely love it though, and could spend all day doing it. You literally never know what could show up out there. Even though we didn't come across an oceanic white-tip, Mark still got some awesome shots of Ed with the whalers. At this stage, the wind and swell had really started to pick up, so we decided to jump back in the boat and move spots to find some cover, which led us to this completely new area which we'd never dived before. On this dive, I spotted a couple coronation trout and a school of big moo, so tucked my chin in and went straight down to the bottom, knowing that this would be my best chance of shooting one. Because in the clear water, I found it's so hard to approach fish when they can see you from a mile away. So to no surprise, when I hit the bottom and looked up, I couldn't see them. I knew I would have to wait, so tucked myself behind the reef and looked down and scratched a bit. Hunting reef fish in the tropics has proven to be incredibly challenging, unless you've got a 4-minute breath hold, compared to back home in Australia, where majority of the fish I've hunted are much easier to approach. It's been a steep learning curve, but I'm learning tons and it's making me a better diver. Another thing I've learned is that in deeper water, it's very easy to overstay your bottom time because your lungs are compressed, which tricks your brain into thinking that you still have plenty of oxygen left, so it's something that I'm very mindful of diving over here in Tonga. At this stage, I looked up and could see the fish coming over. Being very conscious of my bottom time, I knew I had to make a move soon if I wanted to shoot one. But as soon as I lifted slightly off the bottom, the fish scattered and I blew my chance. Later on into the drift, we came across a mega school of barracuda. Ed and Mark both went down, and unfortunately Ed missed, but Mark managed to connect on one. I could see that Mark was struggling a bit with the fish, as his gun had no reel and he only had his belt reel. So instead of trying to shoot one myself, I decided to give him a bit of a boost to the surface. He probably didn't need it, but it helped and ended up paying off on my end, as seconds later, the commotion of the struggling barracuda brought in two nice doggies. After having a quick breathe up, I went back down, and I was having flashbacks though from a nice doggy I'd lost a few weeks prior due to gear failure and also to a poorly placed shot.
A few moments later.
So all that was running through my head, and I just knew I had to get a good shot if I wanted to land this fish. I fortunately managed to put a very solid shot into the fish, hurting it at the point that it didn't really run. In dogtooth fashion, it still put up a heck of a fight, but I managed to keep it off the reef and slowly work it up using the shark clip and bungee line.
Get the jobbie!
Once I had the fish in my hands, I couldn't believe it and was pretty much speechless.
Oh my god! Yes, bro!
Compared to when other people get fish, I'm just screaming my head off. But at this point, a dogtooth tuna was the #1 fish on my bucket list, so I was stoked. After boating the fish, I hopped back in and immediately I could see Ed had shot the second dogtooth tuna that must have still been hanging around. I didn't see what happened, but apparently the fish ran hard along the reef and the bent shaft was a result of it all. A proper storm was starting to roll in, so we decided to head back in, and all in all, it was a great day in the water and one I won't forget anytime soon.